everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here with the Reading Shifts tag. This was created by Hannah's Books and I was very kindly tagged by Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. I'm kind of afraid that I'm going to sound repetitive or that you're going to feel that I have cop-out answers, but know how pleased I am to be talking about these and that these are my genuine thoughts. Then again, that could be my neuroses and social anxiety talking. So let's just get into the questions. Question number one, how has your reading developed over your lifetime? Do the kind of books that bring you the most pleasure now differ from the books you loved earlier in your life? And if you've seen big changes in your reading since you've matured, what might explain those changing interests? Honestly, my reading tastes haven't changed very much. The only change I've really noticed is that I tend to read less fantasy these days. I do read some, but I've become more particular about the kind of fantasy I'm looking for. I have always loved any Celtic-based fantasy, mainly. So anything involving the Fae typically works, but I don't like it too dark, and I don't want it to be too much of an ACOTAR spinoff. Arthurian also really works. Anything involving English or Celtic mythology really hits the spot for me. So there are some of those, and I feel like it's coming back into fashion for young adult and adult fiction. But I felt like there was much more variety of those sorts of books when I was younger. Apart from that, I have always been a massive historical fiction girl, and indeed I loved classics, and you will see all of those themes when I take you on a tour of my children's bookshelf in a little bit. So here you can see my childhood reading taste, mostly on my bookshelf. I do have these two adult Jane Austen series, actually three, that I started reading during high school, and they are too large to fit on any of my other shelves, so there they are. But my childhood and young adult reading taste starts about here. You can see we've got a fair amount of fantasy and historical fiction, some classics like Eight Cousins. That volume on the end are Andersen's fairy tales that belonged to my mother when she was growing up. Coming down to Madeline, I have The Wizard of Oz in the corner there, Paddington, Alice in Wonderland, Frances Hodgson Burnett's books are there in a bind-up. Some abridged great illustrated classics, Winnie the Pooh, some Nancy Drew, Little House on the Prairie in the corner there. Of course, I was the Harry Potter generation. The less said about that, the better. Dear America and the Royal Diaries, the spin-off series, I would buy one with every Borders coupon I could get growing up. The Girls of Many Lands series are ones that I don't hear very much about. American Girl released them for older girls, for about 11 to 13-year-olds. They were wonderfully done if you can get hold of those. Coming down to my regular Dear Americas, if you're unfamiliar, they were fictionalized diaries of real girls throughout different periods of American history. So we have the diary of a Quaker girl who was quote-unquote kidnapped by Native Americans, an Irish girl who came to Boston to work in the mills, a Russian immigrant girl who became a star of the Yiddish theater in New York, and so on and so forth. Some Beverly Clearys, the Eagers, Julie Andrews' two books, lots of historical fiction through here, some Arthurian-based books. Henry Reed was a read aloud between my mother and I. Some Lemony Snicket, of course. I believe there's a Brian Jakes somewhere on its side because it's too tall. The Wishbone books, I loved the Wishbone books. I loved the Wishbone show as well. Lots of bind-ups of Peanuts cartoons. And then way down here at the bottom, lots of picture books. The Magic Tree House Club I adored. These portraits of Little Women were really great, and they took one scene or one adventure from each of the four March sisters and condensed it down for younger readers. And they were my first introduction and reasons why I now love Little Women. Fairy tales, myths, history mysteries, again produced by American Girl. And to prove my love for American Girl, way down here at the bottom, all of my American Girl books and some Amelia's notebooks there in the corner. All of the books they ever produced up until about 2005, I would say. Then just for a glimpse into my other children's and slightly more young adult books. Oh, we've got all sorts of historical fiction along here, a little bit of fantasy retelling, but mostly historical fiction. And then a little bit more down below. Some of these, to be fair, I did read as an adult, going back into young adult. But a lot of these I read throughout late elementary school and middle school. Let me know if you spot any fellow favorites. Question number 2. Do you find yourself choosing different kinds of books at different periods of the year? For example, do the seasons affect what you read? Similarly, you might read very different books while you're on vacation. Here again, I have to say, not really. Like Elizabeth, my tastes have been shaped a little bit throughout the year, purely by yearly readathons that I participate in. So I begin to crave all of my Jane Austen books in July, and indeed I tend to save them up for July, which may or may not be a good habit to have fallen into, and Marissa and I regularly talk about this. Similarly, I tend to crave classics due to Victober. Here I've had less trouble of wanting to save all of my Victorian novels for the fall, but I do tend to crave them a little bit more in the autumn. And then it tends to bleed over into the winter months as well. That being said, I have still enjoyed reading Trollope novels in the summer too, so do with that what you will. But beyond that, I don't feel like I tend to read very seasonally or that my tastes vary hugely when I'm on summer break versus during the school year. I will look at my shelf and say what feels like the right time to read these and try to mold it that way. But it's never the sense that I pick up a book and go, ooh, yes, this is a vacation book. Ooh, this is a Christmas break book. I rarely tend to do that. Number 3, do specific experiences in your life shape what you choose to read? For example, did you read obsessively about child rearing when your kids were little? Well, I don't have children. About gardening as spring is about to begin? I don't garden. Or about the experience of grief when someone you loved died. And as you may have guessed from my brief answers throughout this question, I don't find I tend to do this either. In fact, I find I tend to put off books that mirror my life circumstances. For example, The Young Mrs. Savage. I thought I was going to read in November. I ended up not doing it. And I thought I should read it because it does mirror the life of someone very dear to me, in that one of my dear, dear friends is now a widow with several young children, and it's the 1-year anniversary. And I found I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to read it, especially not around the 1-year anniversary. So I will read it eventually, but I have to feel brave enough and emotionally ready to handle it. And if it's something that I or someone I'm close to is currently experiencing that, I tend to go in the opposite direction. The one thing I will say is that I do often get a lot of amusement out of books about teachers since I have become a teacher. And I say a lot of because there are some books that also make me crawl the walls trying to get away from them. Like, for example, reading Notes on a Scandal was absolutely cringe-inducing. It was just horrible to read about these really unprofessional circumstances that all of the main characters were involved in. So that was not a pleasant experience. However, reading, I forget which Anne book it is. I think it's Anne of Windy Poplars, where she has one of her first big teaching jobs, and she shuts the girl in the closet because this girl will not stop disrupting the lesson. That I found absolutely hilarious, because I wish I could get away with doing that with some kids. I never have, I never will. But there's that small part of my brain that thinks, wouldn't it be nice if? Or indeed reading the first few pages of Matilda, where Roald Dahl rants about how all parents think their children are special and should get special privileges. It hits another note when you are a teacher experiencing lots and lots of different sets of parents. Similarly, as I'm re-listening to the Harry Potter audiobooks, as read by Stephen Fry, in between library audiobooks coming in for me, listening to those as a teacher is a very different experience as well. And I have to say, I'm in the middle of book 5 at the moment, and the descriptions of teaching observations at Hogwarts is anxiety-inducingly accurate. So reading as a teacher is exciting, but it's not often something that I purposely seek out. Number 4, have there been any times in your life when circumstances have limited or changed your reading in some way? Perhaps caretaking responsibilities, or a big move that made it hard to find as much time to read, or personal illness that made it harder to concentrate, or long-term travel that limited your book choices. How do you deal with those circumstances? And I have to say that I've been very fortunate that I have not experienced any of those things personally. There have been the occasional weeks where I'm not reading nearly as much as I would like to, or I'm finding it harder to concentrate, but I am very lucky in that they have never lasted very long. Similarly, have I experienced any reading slumps, and how do I deal with those? Again, I've been very fortunate in that most of my reading slumps tend to be very short-lived. And I tend to deal with both of them by either changing up what I'm reading, switching to something different, something light and easy, by leaning more on audiobooks that I can do while I drive, or while I craft, or while I'm getting things done around the house. I find those very soothing, and thus it's easier for me to experience those if I'm experiencing high levels of anxiety. Other than that, I tend to just have to let the reading slump ride. Just let it ride, because I know whatever experience I'm going through that is causing that slump will end eventually. And it always does, and I always move on to something lovely. Again, not wishing anything horrible on myself, but so far, so good. Question 6. Booktubers also talk about book hangovers, when readers are so moved by a book that they find it difficult to move on to a new book. Have you ever felt this way? I have to say, not really. There are certainly books that I have loved and that I crave more of even after I have finished them. But I've always been able to move on to something else even while I'm craving more of the same. Usually I'll deal with that by lining up the next book in the series or a similar book, but it's typically never kept me from enjoying anything else. Question number 7. Tell us about a few books that almost always work for you. Something that might have remained a favorite throughout your life despite any changing reading tastes. Something that always seems to hit just the right spot when you need a lift. Or perhaps some lifetime book hangover where the text will always be at the back of your mind. If you've been around this channel, say it with me now. Jane Austen and Shakespeare always scratch an itch that is deep in my soul, and I will forever love them for it. Apart from that, I would say any text that plays with those novels or those plays is also going to be incredibly enjoyable for me, provided that it's done well. For that, see all of my videos about my Austen adjacent fiction and nonfiction. I haven't done one for Shakespeare yet. I think there's less of it than other novels, but I do still want to do that nonetheless. I will consider that for the future. Other books that always tend to hit the spot scanning my shelves on the opposite side of the room. The Poldark series. I always want to go back and revisit the Poldark series, and then I tell myself, no, you have about 300 physical books that you are not read in your room. You cannot start rereading a 12-book series. You cannot start doing that. So I keep putting it off, but it is a constant desire to go back to them. Really, all of the books that I have kept hold really strong, really wonderful memories for me. And for that, I would urge you to go back and watch my bookshelf tours, which are, I believe, in a playlist in my channel. So those were my fairly non-committal answers. I hope that that worked for you. If you would like more specifics, let me know down below, ask away. Or indeed, let me know what your answers to this tag would be if you don't have a channel and don't plan on making your own. Now it comes time for me to tag other booktubers with this, which I always do very badly at, but I'm going to try. I don't know who else has been tagged by other people, so apologies if my tags overlap someone else's. But I would love to hear from Marissa at Blatantly Bookish. I think Shelley Swearingen would have some really interesting answers to this as well. Carla, if you're still out there making videos, I will tag you. If not, no pressure, but we do miss you. And indeed, anyone else who is watching who would also like to participate in this tag, link your videos down below if I did not tag you, so I can also check out what you thought. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.